So good morning, everyone. Happy Heritage Day. It is Tuesday, so I'm doing the recording of our classes that were meant to take place today. So I am going to kick off just in terms of a quick recap. We started week 5 with social capital engagement and the public sphere, and I have covered quite a bit of content on there. The first bit of the recording is done. So what we'll do is we'll continue through to the modules. How I am going to be saving it is I'm going to be saving it under week 5, and it'll have the date, the bracket of the date from the 20th to the up until the 24th of March, and I'm going to call them Part A, Part B, Part C, etc., so that you will be able to identify which order the videos fall into. So thank you to Nipo and Imbali for submitting your work in terms of what was needed for the homework. What I am going to be doing today is also just sharing with you on the screen now is the work that Imbali did on Virgin Atlantic and in terms of doing the homework that was required. So I'm going to take it through, and Nipo, one of the things that you need to do, and we've debated this quite extensively, is the idea around the peer rubric and how to understand to actually, or to understand that when you're doing a peer review, you've got to look at that page that I gave you, and then to be able to give feedback in terms of how did your colleague present it, etc. So for this presentation, Mbali is not here. I'm going to take it through, and then I see there was a separate document that was submitted. Sorry, this is actually, I want to check which one I've opened up here. Sorry, just give me 2 seconds. Just want to double check I've got the right presentation up. Okay, so it is in fact Mbali's one. And then there was a document that Mbali put together in terms of, just want this thing to open up. I don't know why it's not opening up. For some weird reason, it's not opening up, but anyway. Sorry guys, you're going to have to give me a few minutes. I don't know what is going on here. Okay, so this is Mbali's presentation that she put together for the impact of situational factors that was relating to the case study on page 80 and more specifically around Virgin Atlantic. So Nipo, you would have had a look at that, the peer rubric that I gave you, and please, if you can't make copies of it and don't have copies, you can actually make notes on an A4 in terms of giving the feedback, but using the peer rubric. Because when I showed you last week is that the peer rubric approach was not followed as well. So very important to please do that, Nipo, while I'm going through Mbali's presentation. And what you can do then is, Mbali, if there's anything additional that you would have spoken through as you've gone through the information, you can share that with Nipo when he is actually doing the peer rubric as well. You can, the presentation will be part of the recording, so you'll be able to have a look at it there. alternatively, you can ask each other to send it to you in terms of that. Okay, let's get into it. So in terms of the difference between the systematic and unsystematic risk, so Mbali is indicated that systematic risk is not diversifiable, which means cannot be avoided, where unsystematic risk is often avoidable. Systematic risk, which can include purchasing power or interest rate risk, affects a large portion of the market. And what you've done very good is, or very well in Bali, is you have used in-text references. I'm glad to see that. The Virgin Atlantic wasn't really affected by the COVID-19. And once again, remember, as third-year students, I'm just increasing the size of the screen. Third-year student, there should be no mistakes, glitches, errors on the document. So firstly, if you look under COVID, it says COVID A19, A9 pandemic. But in any event, that's something I have emphasized. But let me continue. The Virgin Atlantic wasn't really effective by the COVID-19 pandemic because they quickly identified ways in which customers became a priority and received value for money. The strategies they used falls under systematic because when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, it was not to be avoided because it was not to be avoided because it affected everyone. Effectively meant revising their strategy to maintain a reputation for excellent service during a daunting time. Now here again, I'm having difficulty actually reading this in Bali because the fact is it's not written really, it's not written in a readable format. So when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, it was not to be avoided because it affected everyone. The effectively meant revising their strategy. So please, guys, I've given enough indication and guidance on this. Spelling, grammar, sentences making sense need to be in order. Remember, FA1, FA2, FA3, and your summative are all going to look at aspects of this when we are marking. And please do not expect leeway in terms of this. On year 3, you are operating or you're being primed to operate on a strategic level. Hence the reason. And, if you're feeling that I'm too hard on you, wait till we get the marking of the formative assessments. We're then going to be completely strict. Here I'm letting it go because I'm trying to show you where the gaps are in terms of your development. Okay, it is tough. Yes, third year is tough, guys. I did tell you this up front, and it is really, really tough. So I still at this point have faith in you, and Sunipo and Mbali, I still have faith in you. You can do this. But if I identify your gaps now, remember when you work on your formative assessments, hopefully you would have closed those gaps by then, which is drawing to a close very quickly. Can all emergent strategies be successful? Yes, I believe the emergent strategies was successful because COVID-19 was something we didn't expect it to happen, but it happened, and most business, such as the airline industry, was able to come up with strategies to prevent it from affecting them too much. During the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, the effective operational strategy patterns included 3 hybrid strategies and 1 scheduling approach. According to these strategy models, international airlines have 4 strategic alternatives to choose from, while regional airlines have 2 options. And there again, well done, you have used in-text referencing. Regional and international airline strategy alternatives are all effective, but international airline strategy alternatives are the most effective. Airlines that performed well prior to the epidemic must successfully redeploy capacity to capitalize on new opportunities. Airlines with liquidity issues must find solutions to preserve value while boosting liquidity and working capital. Airlines with pre-existing deficiencies in their operational models may find that restructuring is the best way to create future value. Okay. Forefront of developing the strategies for Virgin Atlantic. The customers of Virgin Atlantic, I just want to go back here. Okay. The customers of Virgin Atlantic should be at the forefront of the developing of strategies as they prepare for the future, because the customers and employees are the important stakeholders of the business. Without them, there's no business to operate. Virgin Atlantic employees supported the pay cut of 20% alongside the leadership team and worked unpaid for 8 weeks. The company should protect their employees and customers because they were there to support them during this difficult time they were facing. Their plans ensured that when flying resumed, the health, safety, and security of employees and customers was a priority. And there again, there's a reference, which is excellent. Ways in which Virgin Atlantic can devise new products or services in order to remain successful. So in a market dominated by low-cost carriers and the increasing commoditization of long-distance travel, Virgin Atlantic sought to broaden its appeal to a younger, more price-conscious generation. The airline must also seek to provide customers with additional flights in the Caribbean and connect with audiences on a more intimate level, to test whether adjustments could be made in order to win new market territory and engage with customers in a unique way. The team employed phrases, brand, language optimization, remaining true to our brand principles and providing exceptional customer service regardless of seat allocation on the plane. People can go to their destinations in a variety of methods. And then that's the reference list here at the end. So that is Mbali's presentation. Nipo, you can critique it. I would like you to actually, Nipo, send me through feedback in terms of Mbali's presentation and the supporting document that she has given. I just want to open the supporting document that Mbali has sent. Okay, guys, forgive me. I have actually opened up the wrong document. Okay, then we're going to go through to, this is actually the presentation. The Word document I actually opened up was, so I flipped it the other way around. So in terms of the case study, Virgin Atlantic Group, and it's defining the situation, objectives, target audiences, messages, activities, and evaluations. Okay, so defining the situation, Virgin Atlantic was launched in 1984. It went on to expand into sectors I don't know if this was meant to be one sentence or a new bullet point. It said it went on to expand into sectors. Next bullet point, including travel and leisure, telecommunications and media, travel and entertainment, financial services, and health and wellness. There are more than 40 Virgin companies operating in 35 countries and employing over 60,000 people. Virgin Atlantic had to quickly identify ways in which customers became a priority when COVID-19 pandemic hit. It effectively revised their strategy to maintain their reputation for excellent service during a daunting time. The objectives. So what we're saying here is throughout May, June, and July, Virgin Atlantic cargo aircraft transported more than 43 million pieces of personal protective equipment to the UK. They became in partnership. So there again, in terms of how we write, it's they became in partnership with the Department of Health and Social Care and the NHS to bring back over 120 tons of essential medical supplies and PPE from China, including 3.5 million individual items to be distributed to NHS frontline workers across the UK. Virgin Atlantic worked across side Virgin Unite and Virgin Care. Hundreds of grounded employees are volunteering for the NHS, including cabin crew that's supporting the Nightingale hospitals, and many more are working or volunteering in roles and charities in their communities. Virgin Australia donated thousands of supplies from their 125 aircraft to people in need. This included rolls of toilet paper and meals. It will relocate its flight operations from London Gatwick to London Heathrow with the objective of preserving its slot portfolio at London Gatwick in order to respond to customer demand. So here again in Bali, just a quick word of advice. Remember when we put in text and we put in images, like the circle here is distracting in terms of the presentation. Rather have a cleaner section where there's no sort of images or anything that's behind that cuts across on the words. It just is presented better when it's looked upon. Now, if you can imagine this on a massive screen, then you would also, it's just something to think about. Target audience, employees. The peak year was recorded in 2018 at 8,571 employees. In 2020, the airline company was employed to 7,437 people. In terms of customers, in 2020, Virgin Atlantic Airways experienced a drastic decline in the number of passengers, which amounted to only 1.14 million. The founder, Richard Branson, and his friend Nick Powell launched a mail order and record business and chose the name Virgin because they were entirely new to business. Okay. A number of customers. This is an illustration of over the years from 2008 up to 2020, the number of customers that the airline actually had. Then the number of employees. This also gives an overview. I just don't see with this graph here, it's not entirely clear in terms of the legends. So in Bali, when you're taking screenshots of pictures, make sure it's clear enough, because although it says number of people employed by Virgin Atlantic Airways Limited from 2013 to 2020, just a tip, if you look on the side, the legends are not entirely clear. So just double check that when you are also doing your presentation. And then at Virgin Atlantic Holidays, we believe that everyone should have the opportunity to take on the world, no matter who you are, no matter where you want to go. Okay, that's the CEO of Virgin Atlantic. Messages. Bali, I'm not sure here in terms of just from the style of the presentation, whether there was supposed to be a picture in the empty blocks or the headings at the bottom was supposed to go into the block. I'm not entirely sure. So customers in number one priority, the safety and well-being of our people and our customers is always our number one priority. The second one, customers a number one priority, is a duplication of the heading, I'm sure. I don't know. Or if it's not, then that's fine. Virgin Atlantic will reduce its schedule, prioritizing core routes based on customer demand. Then its employees is also a huge priority to the airline, offering a one-time voluntary severance package to all employees. This sends out the message that the airline also cares about the employees. And lastly, employees is also a huge priority to the airline. The CEO has indicated that the decisions they made must balance survival without sacrificing the future and always safeguard the health, safety, and security of the employees. In terms of activities, the airline has taken decisive action to reduce costs, preserve cash, and to protect as many jobs as possible. Virgin Atlantic continues to explore all available options to obtain additional external funding. Virgin Atlantic will make a significant contribution to the UK's economic recovery by providing essential connectivity and competition. The airlines kept its promise and hired back the employees that they lost. Right, moving on to evaluation. So Virgin Atlantic making a difference. They still hold the duty to preserve our world for everyone to enjoy and aim to make positive contributions to help locals and tourists enjoy our destinations. Virgin Atlantic cares about all employees, rebuilds the airline, return to profitability 2022, and to rekindle the trust and love of their customers by commenting to provide competition. Customers by commenting to provide competition and connectivity to consumers in the business in the UK. So in conclusion, what ways in which Virgin Atlantic Group can devise new product services in order to remain successful in a market dominated by low-cost carriers and the increasing commoditization of long-distance travel. Virgin Atlantic sought to broaden its appeal to a younger, more price-conscious generation. The airline also sought to provide customers with additional flights in the Caribbean and to connect with audiences on a more intimate level. And that is the end of Mbali's presentation. So my apologies on my side. I actually did it the flip side where I showed you her Word document and then went through to, yeah, the presentation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to open Nipo's document here, and then I'm going to share. So Nipo, what you would have done through that exercise is you have done a peer review on Mbali's presentation and the supporting document. Now, in terms of Mbali, what you're going to be doing is you're going to have a look at Nipo's presentation And if there's anything additional that he needs to send through, he can do so because you are not presenting this. I'm doing so on your behalf. You're more than welcome. But remember, once again, I reiterate, peer review. What this means is you are looking at that matrix in terms of the template that I gave you, and you are going to be critiquing how well did your colleague actually conduct the presentation or the homework that was needed to be done. And yeah, so let's go through to NEPOS. So NEPOS is Virgin Atlantic, the impact of situational factors. Under the situational analysis, so Mbali, you should be doing now a critique on NEPOS presentation. Let's continue. Virgin Atlantic, together with a great number of organizations, took a large hit by the unprecedented events caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. While attempting to maintain profitability, they had to consider their stakeholders. The pandemic forced them to make the hardest decision in their company's history. We examined the strategies used by the Virgin Atlantic Group to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is Virgin Atlantic's strategies, objectives in response to the pandemic. In March 2020, they suspended 41% of their passenger flying as travel restriction came into force. Cargo operations, so I see you've used an in-text reference, Nepo, which is good. Cargo operations became the revenue driver of the airline. Announced plans to reshape and resize Virgin Atlantic, let go of more than 3,500 employees, plan to ensure that when flying resumed, the health, safety, and security of their employees and customers was a priority. Were these strategies orientated towards a systematic approach or unsystematic approach to strategy development? Virgin Atlantic responded to the COVID-19 outbreak with a set of systematic approaches without concentrating on specifics. They were able to analyze Virgin Atlantic's complex worldwide points of view, as they are a major organization that works globally, from their customers, staff, stakeholders, without focusing on details, such as the company's responsibility to their employees and keeping up profitability. Virgin Atlantic was able to have a better understanding of the complex problems they had as a company without simplifying the reality of how the pandemic affected them as a company. Okay, next slide. Can all emergent strategies be successful? First, we need to look at the problems emergent strategies can present. A shift in attention away from the organization's original general strategic objectives, neglecting to weigh all viable options before making a decision. I've seen you've used in-text referencing, that is good. Emergent strategies can be difficult to implement successfully without the proper organizational structure and culture in place, which I think that Virgin Active, are we talking about Virgin Active as the gym, or are we talking about Virgin Atlantic? So which I think that Virgin Active as an organization had forested a culture of togetherness as an organization, which was sad to see when they had to let their employees go. There are several advantages and disadvantages to emergent strategies. Advantages of emergent strategies: flexibility with the use of emergent strategies. Organizations can have the flexibility to roll with the punches that unprecedented events can present. Innovation: emergent strategies can bring about innovation and change to organizations. Disadvantages of emergent strategies: so there is riskiness. Emergent strategies can be considered more risky than traditional strategic approaches. Failing to carefully consider options. Emergent strategy can also fail if businesses do not carefully consider all their options before acting. Who should be at the forefront of developing the strategies for Virgin Atlantic as it prepares for the future? The organization's leader ought to oversee creating emerging strategies for Virgin Atlantic's future. Future strategy development needs the backing of leadership. Otherwise, Virgin Atlantic's organization's growth may be hindered. Ways Virgin Atlantic can devise new products or services to remain successful. Check that the product or service aligns with Virgin Active. Once again, I'm not sure, Nipo, are we talking about Virgin Atlantic Group or are we talking about the gym, Virgin Active? So remember, double checking our work. Check that the product or service aligns with Virgin Active emergent strategy. Carry out market research to check demand for whatever product or service they might offer. Give their employees a voice. And you will see in there that Nipo's added his references, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I am going to share the other document, which I have opened up. So in terms of Nipo's supporting document that he has submitted with the presentation, in terms of the Virgin Group, Virgin is a member of the Virgin Group, which creates and nurtures significant Virgin enterprises in order to assist the Branson family and the expansion of the Virgin Active or the Virgin brand. They want to make a positive impact on business, travel and leisure, health, and wellness, music and entertainment, telecoms and media, financial services, and space are just a few of the industries represented by the Virgin Group's branded enterprises. The Virgin Group is able to realize certain assets thanks to the strengths, diversification, and maturity of its portfolio, reinvesting profits and sales revenues to support, develop, and expand both new and current businesses. The principal activities of the Virgin Group is investment management, brand licensing. Both of these activities are undertaken for the entire Virgin Group by Virgin Management. They view success as a combination of globally competitive, lucrative businesses, as well as the long-term value we add to people and the environment. So preventing the effects of climate change is a top priority for the Virgin branded businesses. So we think that by 2050 or sooner, all Virgin branded firms should have net zero emissions. Now, just a very quick question here, and that's the end of Nipo's supporting document to his presentation. So when we're saying is here that they want to also contribute to the environment, the last paragraph, right? So when we're looking at the sentence that says, so preventing the effects of climate change is a top priority for the Virgin branded businesses. And we think that by 2050 or sooner, all Virgin branded firms should have net zero emissions. So we think, is it, Nipo, your view that by 2050 or sooner, that Virgin branded firms would have net zero emissions? Or is this the company's view? In terms of referencing, that is why referencing in text and other referencing, the reference list at the end is so critical. I know that this is something that you are thinking. It's similar to the discussion we had last week, is that the expectations of the level of work that I am preempting, right, is misaligned to probably what you're thinking. So once again, I need to say this, is that on a third level, right, we expect quality. So I'm going to be expecting quality. It's not a misalignment. So if you don't think you need to deliver quality in year 3, it's a misalignment from your side, because it is very clear on, especially on level 3 for public relations, that has an NQF level 6 attached to it. You're going to deliver quality. Spelling, grammar, all of that. I am very cognizant of the fact that not everyone's first language is English. And I absolutely, I said I'm cognizant of that fact. However, in South Africa, the business language throughout is English. And when we're doing public relations, we, even if you go into the career and you start, there's a need for translation of a message into different languages. That is a little bit different. Okay, so you may think I'm being hard on you, but why am I being hard on you? There's nothing, absolutely nothing for my benefit, guys. It is for your benefit. And one day you will thank me for this, and thank me for pushing you beyond your boundaries. I must be thankful, and I must say thank you to Nipo and Mbali for doing the homework and sending it through. It is much appreciated. Um, Continue working on it. You are getting there, but we need to up the standard. So every time you do an exercise in terms of class, in terms of a discussion, you need to up your game, because that is what I'm here to do. Is I'm here, and to put it in a context like this, you know, when you go out and you're mining and things like this, and you find a diamond, right? The diamond will have sand around it. It will have a little bit of rocks. And what happens is when you polish that diamond, right? And there's no sand and there's no additional pieces of rocks around it, it glitters from a mile away. So when I push you to your limits, is me wanting you to shine. Now, I'll give you a very good example. A very good example. And Bali, you were on that Teams meeting last week, right? With Sanele, the CSI manager from Aspen Pharmacare. Nipo, you did message that you weren't able to join, or you had connectivity issues. Now, if you want to be like a Sanele, I'm not saying each one of us are unique. When I'm saying like a Sanele, Sanele was at one point sitting in the seat where you are sitting now. Meaning that if you put in the effort, hard work, commitment, that is what's going to be the result of it. So Claire actually lectured Sanele, and Claire mentioned, you know, Sanele was the one always asking questions, always, saying, putting new things out there. She was very vocal in terms of asking questions, engaging, getting to know more things that she didn't understand. And today she is absolutely not sorry. You could see there were some moments where she was quite emotional, because at 29, she did not foresee sitting in the seat that she's sitting in. So that is what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to make you a Sanele, don't get me wrong. What I'm trying to do is polish you and push you. If I don't push you beyond your boundaries, and if I just sugarcoat this and not say, guys, this is not done properly, you are not going to develop and grow. So that is why I am getting tougher and tougher on everyone. On Nipo and Mbali, I'm getting tough on you. It's not because I want to do that and I want to make life difficult. No, certainly not. So take that food for thought and apply it into your life and think about it. Think about it. I know in Bali you did ask the question about consultancy. Do you need a license to actually go into a consultancy? You don't need the license, and it was all, I think people answered the questions there. But the one thing that you do need is you need to actually be on a level, because remember, then you're going to be pitching to clients, you're going to be pitching to customers. It's a different ball game. Right, so we are now going to continue. Government, civil society, the role of governance, all of that. There's a video that I need to share. And then what I am going to do is I may record the videos for up to an hour and then download, upload. The download and the upload takes a bit of time, and just keep putting them up so you will have access to them throughout the day. The first part of the video is already up on YouTube, and you would have seen it. So I'm going to play the video and we'll carry on.
In this lecture, we will look at some of Michel Foucault's ideas about power and about the link he finds between power and science. We will see that Foucault gives us a new way of thinking about power, a way which allows us to find power in places where we would have never expected to find it before, including in the university and in scientific knowledge itself. To understand Foucault's thinking, we will make a distinction between two kinds of power: repressive power and normalizing power. To think of power in terms of repression is the traditional way of thinking. Against that, Foucault suggests that most power, and indeed the most important kind of power in our modern society, doesn't repress at all. It works in a far subtler, less visible way. This power is what Foucault calls normalizing power. But let's start on the repressive side. When we think of someone who is exercising power, some of the images that may come up in our minds are these: a judge ordering a criminal to be locked up for 20 years, a country using its superior military to conquer another country, an angry boss telling his employee to do as he's told or get fired, and so on. When we think of power, we tend to think of violence, whether physical or mental, whether actual or only threatened. This is the idea of power as repression. You want to do one thing, but someone else uses their power to force you to do their bidding instead. Now, such power is undeniably effective, but there is also a sense in which in each of these cases, the need to apply power implies a failure. The state only has to lock up criminals if its laws have been broken. The bigger country only needs to go to the trouble of invading the smaller country if it has failed in other ways to make the smaller country do what it wants. And a boss who has to threaten his employees is not really in control. A boss who is really in control is obeyed without the need for threats. Repressive power, then, while no doubt the most visible form of power, is also kind of second-rate. If you were really powerful, you wouldn't need to use it. Our lives are shaped by repressive power or by the threat of repressive power only on rare occasions. For instance, take stealing. Only a few of us actually go to jail for stealing. And what's more, it's not the case that the rest of us are motivated not to steal because we are afraid of going to jail, because of the threat of jail. We don't walk through the supermarket with the desire to steal things held in check only by our fear of the police. No, we don't even think about stealing. If we think about it, we don't consider it seriously. We don't want to steal. If we find someone's wallet on the street with 100 euros in it, we'll give it back to the owner with all the money still in it. That's the kind of people we are. And that is where Foucault's idea of normalizing power comes in. Repressive power forces us to do what we don't want to do. Normalizing power, on the other hand, makes us want to do what we have to do anyway. It turns us into people who automatically, by their own will, do what society wishes them to do. If our parents, our schools, and so on have been successful at teaching us not to steal, we are now the kind of people I just described. People who can't even imagine themselves stealing anything. If they have been successful at teaching you the value of education and diplomas, then you are now the kind of student who is motivated to learn well for your university courses and to get a degree in 4 years. Of course, while you are students, society allows you to do some stupid things like drinking too much beer, smoking pot, failing a course now and then. But society can afford to, because it knows that when you have finished your degree, you will be not just ready, but eager to join the workforce, make yourself useful, pay taxes, not break the law, and in general, just be an upright, normal citizen. Normal. That's the key word here. Normalizing power is power that determines what we see as normal. It constructs our view of the world and of ourselves. In that way, it shapes our beliefs, our desires, and our decisions, while at the same time giving us the idea that these are our own beliefs, desires, and decisions, that nobody has forced them upon us. And in a sense, that's true. Even though our lives have been shaped in countless ways by the normalizing power of society, well, they're still our lives. Foucault is extremely skeptical of the idea that there is some true you hiding underneath what society has made of you. Without society, you wouldn't be a person at all. All of us always are and always will be normalized to a very large extent. I said before that repressive power is in a sense second rate. If you need to use force or threats to get people to do what you want, you're already solving a problem that ideally would never have arisen. Ideally, people would do what you want without threats. They would do what you want simply because they consider that the right thing to do. This, of course, is precisely what normalizing power accomplishes. Normalizing power is really first-rate power. The power that ensures that you and I don't have to be jailed because we wouldn't steal anyway. The power that ensures that we do what our boss tells us because we believe in hierarchy and perhaps desire to climb in that hierarchy and be bosses ourselves one future day. Foucault goes on to point out that while repressive power is often focused in very specific institutions and individuals, the police force, the army, the judge, the bosses, the politicians, normalizing power, on the other hand, is everywhere. The family is a source of normalizing power, and so is the school, the university, the hospital, the psychiatric clinic, and even the commercial break on television, which tells me that I should desire to smell of musk and ginger. If we want to understand how power works, these are the institutions that we need to analyze and understand. And a large part of Foucault's work is dedicated to doing exactly that. Two important things follow from Foucault's view. First, that power is not something that is wielded by a few powerful people at the expense of others. On Foucault's view, everybody is subjected to power. Society has given the employee an idea of how an employee should behave, but it has also given the boss an idea of how a boss should behave. The boss might have more repressive power than the employee, but both of them are equally subjected to normalizing power. And the same holds for everyone. Nobody is free. Second, it follows that scientific knowledge cannot be divorced from power. For one thing, the institutions which generate and spread scientific knowledge are themselves sources of normalizing power. A university education is turning the student into a person who thinks and acts in certain ways. And by the time you are a working scientist, you will have incorporated an entire way of thinking so deeply that you'll never get rid of it again. But perhaps even more importantly, scientific knowledge itself is an extremely important standard of normalization. Based on science, doctors get to decide whether I am sick or healthy, and thus whether it is normal for society to expect me to work for my money. Based on science, psychiatrists get to decide whether my behavior is normal or a sign of mental illness. Based on science, economists get to decide at what age I can stop working. Based on science, historians get to decide what I am taught about the origins of my society. And so on. Science is not divorced from power. It plays an extremely important role in the social structures that surround us, and those structures are continuously exerting their normalizing power on each of us. So, what's the use of knowing all that? Again, Foucault doesn't believe that you can radically break from the ways you have been shaped by society, because then there would be nothing left. But he does believe that by becoming aware of all the many ways in which we are subjected to power, we can be a little more autonomous than if we remained in the dark about this and erroneously believed ourselves to be as free as birds.
All right, so we had a look at Michael Foucault's viewpoint on power and what does power mean in the workplace, in society, and in terms of limitations to power. Because, like the video says, that if we're meant to stop working, if it says we're meant to stop working at the age of 65, there is power. Everything is underpinned by power in terms of society. If you look at the government, if you look at any aspect of society, there's different plays of power. And in the workplace, this is what you're going to find, is there's going to be generally a whole lot of power dynamics, which you're going to be able to navigate through. You must be able to navigate through and to be able to overcome those challenges. You're going to probably have a boss one day. You may not just have one job, you may have many jobs through your career. And you may come across a boss or a line manager who wields power in the sense that everything they say, it's their way. It has to be done their way. And then you will come across, on the other hand, with leaders who sit in places of power. However, their leadership style is completely different. They don't wield that power, they don't dictate it, and they don't instill fear in people. So it is very important when you look at social power and to be able to identify different aspects of it. Okay. Now, releasing productive social power. Engaging civil society means creating productive power structures within society. Power over is someone's ability to affect the actions of another. The example of your boss. If your boss says, I want this presentation now, or I want it today, you cannot say no, because that is your boss and you are scared of your boss. On the other hand, on the flip side, when we look at power, and if your boss says, I want this presentation as soon as possible, and you are able to negotiate, like, I can deliver this at 4 o'clock. So power is very, very integral in terms of how we work, how we live. There are other forms of power, right? Power to, power within, power with. Now, if we look at table 4.2, which is on page 92 of your textbook, Let's look at each one of the four elements that I've mentioned now in terms of the breakdown. So power within. It's an ability of the powerful to affect the actions and thoughts of those who are less powerful. It also means the strength to resist dominance. So remember when we say we have the power within, we can achieve anything we want to. There's no limitations. That is the power that we speak to. The power within also speaks to the strength to resist dominance. Power, not within, sorry, power over. So now with the power within, it's gaining a sense of self-identity, confidence, and awareness. That is a precondition for action. When applied to the community, it has to do with the sense of communal social identity. It's becoming more self-aware, self-identity, confidence, awareness, being aware of your actions as well. The power to, it describes the exercising agency and potential to fight for one's rights, citizenship, or voice. It refers to the capacity to take action. And how apt is that today is Human Rights Day? Speaking to the power to, it's to fight for one's rights, okay? Power with, it refers to the synergy that comes from partnerships and collaboration with others. It conveys a sense of solidarity, capacity building, social networks, and strength emanating from relationships. So when you get groups of activists, right, they come together in collaboration and collectively for a specific cause, right, or through a network. And what they're basically trying to do there is to create a power group, like a voice, a powerful voice, one powerful voice, speaking to the same message. That is in essence what it is. So power shapes and molds people's, their disposition, values, and practices. Power is also closely related to knowledge. Pervasive power is all the interactions in the public sphere that contribute to creating knowledge. It is embedded in the societal fabric and its structures. It is invisible, deeply entrenched in day-to-day life, and becomes part, and it is taken for granted as a reality. So you need to sit and really reflect on this aspect of social power. Now, the four categories that I've read to you, I'm sure you can think of many examples. If you look at leaders, right? And once again, I say this is when I mention people's names or leaders or whether it's a political party, it does not mean I'm affiliated or I aspire to their belief system or what they stand for, right? So I use it purely for illustration purposes. If you look at Nelson Mandela, you have leaders where they have an unspoken power, where people will follow even if they're not asked to. You have other leaders, right? If you look at Adolf Hitler, for people to follow him, what had to happen? There are so many different leaders you can go and research, and in terms of their style. Okay. Power can come from rules of engagement with society, freedom of expression, or ease with which citizens can access information. The internet has become one of the most powerful tools that information can be accessed. I can go right now onto Google and I can type in that what are the main points of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. That information is accessible to me. If I look at government and any law that has been legislated and gazetted, if I want to find out what the Labor Relations Act says. Labor relations, especially specifically when you're in a work environment. What does it say? What does the act say? If I want to know the statistics of the number of people in Gauteng today, or what is the unemployment rate today, I can go to Statistics South Africa, the website, and I can gauge a whole lot of information. If it even can provide me with graphs and pie charts and all of these nice things. So that is very, very interesting, to also important to understand. Part of your journey is what we call research. And research is the accessing of information which will be able to empower you, because that is what it does. We're not saying it gives you power, it empowers you. Accessing information through research, credible sources, empowers an individual. Biopower, named productive power, may influence our perceptions of what is normal, what is odd, what is acceptable, what is improper. It shapes our collective views on what issues are important and urgent. It depends on communication networks and society. Now, there's a very fine line in terms of biopower and when it leads to a skewed perception of reality, if you can call it. I'll give you an example. I may be paging through a cosmopolitan magazine, and every page that I flip through, there's a beautiful woman, long flowing hair, an absolutely slim body, flawless skin, perfect eyelashes, perfectly shaped cheekbones, and all of that, guys. You kind of get the picture what I'm talking about. And these goes for male models as well. It's not just women. So throughout growing up and into early becoming a teenager, early adult, and into adulthood, you are looking at what society perceives as beautiful and powerful and this becomes a norm, right? And that's how we become socialized into believing that that perception of the world, which is so skewed, is not right. There are millions of women, even men, but mainly women, who suffer from disorders, eating disorders like anorexia, right? Because what they essentially do is they look at these, what society puts on billboards, in magazines, on TV, and they abuse their own bodies to try and to fit into that sort of perception of reality, if you can call it. Not their reality, but society's reality. So even when you look at car adverts or TV commercials, right? If it's a car, you might have a family driving in it, which positions it as a family car. You need a bigger car. That one advert that was played, the BMW one, right? I played that advert for you. And it shows that an SUV is not the only vehicle that a family can fit into. But what was done is that it's positioned in society as a bigger vehicle and it's equipped for a family. Meanwhile, a normal sedan is able to fit a full family of 4 comfortably. So be careful when you look at society and what society has painted and how it's skewed our perceptions. That is also what we call biopower. It's a source of power that influences our perceptions as to what is normal. What is normal? What is the normal body figure or shape? Skinny and long legs and long flowing hair. No, it is not that. Beauty, I always maintain, and this is my personal take on this, beauty comes from within. No matter what your shape, no matter what your size is, No matter what your color is, beauty comes from within. So it is very interesting in terms of this and applying it. So when you now when you've been made aware of what it is, the name, what it's called, biopower, and in society, the place it has. The next time you go into a store, where you see or whether you see a billboard, when you look into a magazine, when you look into the newspapers, when you look into a store that you walk into that has clothing, right? It's very funny, and this is just a sidebar thing. If you go into stores, right, whether it be your Truworths or Woolworths or Foschini's or Edgar's, and you look at mannequins, right? For me, it is just absolutely unbelievable in terms of the size of the mannequins, in terms of the build. It's skinny. I often look at a dress and I thought, oh, I love that dress. But the thing is, it's made for a specific body shape. It's not meant for me, you know. The other thing that I always look, because remember, part of being a public relations practitioner is even whether you're shopping or on a Saturday or Sunday, or for today is a holiday, you might go to the shops. I always look around and I kind of like think about things. Another example of this is how social conditioning works. So stores need to do their marketing and advertising, which I'm all for. Whenever you walk into a store, right? So we start with Valentine's Day. Then we go into Easter, right? Then we go into Mother's Day, Father's Day, different days, right? If you walk into a store almost 2-3 weeks before, at the entrance, as soon as you step in the store, it is visible. Valentine's Day, Easter. Easter bunnies were available, guys, in February, and I kid you not. There was a table in one of the stores that already had chocolate Easter bunnies on the table promoting Easter. And my husband had purchased them and come home, and I said, oh, I see you bought, lint bunnies, He says, no, he hasn't bought me chocolate in a while, but also he just wanted to also show me, because he also now consciously, because of me, is able to identify this. So he said, I walked into a store and we just passed Valentine's Day, 2 days over, and we already have Easter chocolates on the table in the front displayed. So that always I laugh at. The moment I walk in a store, and if I laugh, and he immediately knows why I'm laughing, is because this is what society does, is they bring all of this. So in a country where things like, they promote health and wellness and all of that, for me, I don't know, and then it entices you to actually buy it. But that is purely my personal view, guys. It is not the textbook version or the course related perception, but it's my personal view in terms of how I, as a public relations professional, interrogate things in the public domain. Okay. Right. We've come to a very exciting section now. You guys, Nipo and Mbali, I would have loved to see the expression on both your faces right now. Class activity. Now, on page 92, right, we've gone through the 4 different aspects of what power is. Power over, power within, power to, power with. We also went through just now a very important terminology called biopower, and that speaks to society's perception. On page 92, sort of roughly around the middle of the page, sorry about the birds, the noise of the birds, my windows and doors are open here. There's a reflection exercise that says, explain the role of communication as the key process within the public sphere. Secondly, a way to increase the productive power within society. And then there's a third step to the activity, is you populate table 4.2 that says forms of power, and you need to provide a minimum of 3 examples for each of those areas listed in page 4, well, in the table 4.2. Class activity, what we're going to do, let me reiterate that. On page 92, right, on the middle of the page, there's a section called reflection. You need to explain the role of communication as the key process within the public sphere, a way to increase the productive power within society. And then thirdly, the table in 4.2, power over, power within, power to, power with, and also make use of examples of biopower, right? I've given you many examples. The magazine, the skinny models, you know, long flowing hair, long legs, flawless skin, all of that, the mannequins and the models in stores. I've used a number of examples. Okay, so now the reason why I asked you to do it in a presentation format, you can't do it in Word, but the reason why I'm asking you to do it in a presentation format is for practice. Because once you get into the working environment as a public relations practitioner, you are going to be doing presentations left, right, and center, which means you're going to do them all the time. So I'm basically doing this twofold. Not only am I teaching you, right, I'm prepping you for the real world, because this is going to be the reality. You must be able to navigate through PowerPoint. There's going to be some times where PowerPoint is going to drive you insane. So you need to be able to do things like, if you look at the top of this page, transitions, animations, right? You must be able to do things like work on the design. Remember, Mbali, when I said in your presentation specifically, the image was going over the words, even the airplane in the back, and you had words. Rather use that airplane as a watermark in your presentation. And guys, it's very simple to add a watermark. So in Bali, in terms of your presentation, right, and what you could have done, just so the picture has sort of less visibility and the emphasis is on the text. When you're on a slide, right, I'm going to just teach you very briefly. When you're on a slide, you go to this tab that says Format Background here. You click on it, right, and then it's going to say picture or text fill, right? And you're going to insert from your file, you're going to insert a picture, right? And then once you've inserted a picture, you decrease the transparency level. So if I have to do this, let us try and do this. If I insert here actually a picture, let's just say we're going to insert, okay, we're going to insert my picture, right? I am there. What you do is you try and get the transparency. If you look what I'm doing on here, the transparency of the image, I can get right down to 75% and it doesn't interfere with the words. So if you keep going, it will be very faint on there. Okay, so that is a one-on-one, well, quick way of doing it. So in Bali, that picture that you actually did, in terms of the plane and where you had the text. My picture doesn't want to go now. Let's format this background. I don't know why it doesn't want to go. Okay, so that is what you do when you're presenting. So now that exercise you're going to work on today in a presentation format. What you are going to do today is you are going to send me the peer review of both the Virgin Active for Mbali. You're going to send me yours for Nipo, and Nipo, you're going to be sending me yours for Mbali. Exercise 92. You need to work on and have it sent through tomorrow. Sometime tomorrow. I'm not sure if I am going to be, as I've mentioned, have live lectures this week, but I will inform you for tomorrow and Thursday. I may do recorded lectures. Unfortunately, I am writing exams, and this is an arrangement that I made with the college that the weeks that I'm writing exams, the slides or the lectures will be pre-recorded. So please bear with me on that one. But it needs to be done by tomorrow and sent through, because like I did earlier where I covered the presentations, that is exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to do that on Thursday or tomorrow, but I need it sometime tomorrow, please. Right, we are moving on to stakeholder engagement in the context of government, civil society relationships, building social capital through engagement. And that is going to be on page 92, right, up to 101. It's on there, right? Now, there is a video that I'm going to play, and that video is on project management, stakeholder engagement. What is stakeholder engagement? So if you give me a couple of seconds while I can just open this for you.
Stakeholder engagement is often confused with stakeholder management. But what exactly is the difference? At its core, stakeholder management is a systemic process designed to help you engage with your stakeholders. It examines the what and the who, whereas stakeholder engagement looks at how this will be achieved. Some people mistakenly believe that by putting a process in place, they'll gain the power to control their stakeholders. While this might seem like that by putting a process in place, they'll gain the power to control their stakeholders. While this might seem like it would make your job easier, it rarely works that way in reality. People are more likely to respond positively to your project if they are also connected, participating, and involved. Stakeholder engagement means building relationships with your stakeholders in a respectful and constructive way. It's the how of working with stakeholders. This enables you to get the best out of the relationship and get stakeholders on board with the project vision. As a project manager, it's up to you to listen to, learn from, consult with, inform, and influence your stakeholders. Both stakeholder management and stakeholder engagement are vital to successful project delivery and are needed throughout a project lifecycle, not just at the beginning.
Okay, that's one video. There's another video that I've got to show you quickly.
For just $67, you can make as many videos as you want, and you never need to pick up a camera or use any fancy editing software. With Doodly, you drag, you drop, you tweak some settings, and boom, video done. It'll take you just a few minutes. So
stakeholder engagement. It's one of the business world's most popular buzzwords. But what does it really mean? No, it's not that.
Huh?
It's not that either. Clever, but no.
Huh?
Let's back up a bit. Say your company makes widgets and business is booming. Naturally, people start to notice you. One day, you drive to work to find protesters at the company gates claiming your widgets use a toxin that is bad for the planet. Soon, more stakeholders hear about the protests and decide to join the campaign. Suddenly, you're in the news for all the wrong reasons.
Yikes.
So what do? You're the bad guy. So maybe you call the authorities, arrest the activists, and tell your story, explaining the many great things your company does and how ridiculous those crazy hippies are. Problem solved, right? Not so fast. In the end, it doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong. The cycle of demonization and finger-pointing rarely leads to solutions, and almost always to gridlock and a tarnished brand. To overcome this cycle, we at Future 500 advocate for stakeholder engagement. Technically, it's the systematic and proactive integration of feedback from those impacted by your organization's operations. In practice, it's all about humanization. When we acknowledge our shared humanity and admit that none of us is perfect, we can begin removing our masks and working together to find common ground. Stakeholder engagement means building trust, even between those with very different views, from right to left, corporate to NGO. It means knocking on doors before problems arise rather than after. It means listening more than talking. It means communicating with humility rather than boasting. And it means engaging over and over again to continue raising the bar in a way that's better for your stakeholders, your planet, and your bottom line. Now, it doesn't always have to be formal. After all, most friendships aren't built in the boardroom. And having a little fun never hurt either. When we stop building walls and start building bridges, we create a space for solutions that are systemic, innovative, and lasting. So the next time you find protesters at your gate, consider this. Maybe you shouldn't have a gate in the first place. Future 500 is a San Francisco-based nonprofit specializing in stakeholder engagement. We align the power of the private sector with the purpose of its most critical stakeholders to address imminent environmental and social issues. Learn more at future500.org.
Okay, interesting video, right? So guys, the most important thing that you need to understand is that there's a difference between stakeholder management and stakeholder engagement. Please ensure that you don't look at it as it can be used interchangeably or it's the same. It is not. The example that we showed in the video is actually such a simple way of putting it. Is if you come up with a product, you manufacture a product or service, and something goes wrong, like it was the issue with one of the companies where crayons, there was a specific product being used in crayons, and crayons are used predominantly by children, and it was harmful to children. Now, what could have happened in that case is that the company could have just let the activists continue or the people continue protesting, right? Call the police to get them arrested because they're camping in outside his place of work or his home. Or what the ultimate thing that you want to do is build stakeholder engagement. Now, just to emphasize, right, stakeholder engagement is not done like in the example where there's a widget being created and there was a toxin and it affected people and people protesting, that is not the time then to start engaging with stakeholders. Your stakeholder engagement has got to begin from right at the beginning, so that when you hit speed bumps along the way, you are able to sit down and have a discussion with those stakeholders for the best outcome. If you look in cases where there were union members or unions, and they're people who belong to the union, right, striking because of wage negotiations that were deadlocked. Now, in those instances, it is very key for stakeholder engagement to actually happen to avoid situations like that. If you look at the case of Marikana, right, it was absolutely horrific what happened. But in my personal view, and this is what I thoroughly believe, is if there was better understanding, better engagement, although employees actually killed people, right, which was also just so sad and tragic for me, is that I think if there was a better engagement, stakeholder engagement process in place, a lot of the turmoil and the deaths, even the deaths, could have been avoided. That is just my personal view, but I think the Marikana thing is something that will forever be embedded in our minds, because it was so crucial in terms of, or it was so tragic what happened. So that is what stakeholder engagement is. It means continuously working on the relationship with your stakeholders. And if you look at the video, the last video, and it's not only having an engagement session in a formal setting, it can be in a social setting. So if you look at your media relations, and something that I've mentioned to you before is when we do media relations, there's often cases where we want to build good relationships with media before something goes wrong. And in some instances, companies actually pay to take the journalist and their spouse to a game reserve for a weekend. And during that time, in as much as it is a social exercise, the journalists get to talk to the CEO and they get an understanding of the company and what the company is all about, and gets to know the company a little bit better, as well as the leadership of the organization. So it is absolutely critical as a public relations practitioner to do stakeholder engagement, but do it thoroughly and do it genuinely. But also, this is not a process that's done at the end when something has gone wrong. So government engagement in the context of government civil society relationships. The concept of stakeholder engagement originated in organizational studies and was initially applied to business organizations. It has since been applied to nonprofit organizations and government in the context of engagement between governments and civil society. Stakeholder engagement is a socially responsive approach to communication practice with outcomes aligned with the individual, community, civic, and institutional benefits. Engagement is a dynamic, communication-based process that entails participation, experience, and shared action. So this is when we speak to stakeholder engagement, and that's more specifically in the context of government, right, and civil society relationships. So even if you look at nonprofit organizations, non-government organizations, and the work that they are doing to assist in closing the gaps where we have challenges, like poverty alleviation, skills development, where there are gaps. There's so many different areas. Now, the characteristics of stakeholder engagement. So when you look at page 93, remember, in order for you to be able to tick this box to say, I am actually doing stakeholder engagement. There's a number of factors that you need to look at to take into consideration as to identifying, yes, it is speaking to that, no, it is not. So the very first one is being inclusive, right? So all parties must have the capacity to participate in the discourse and have a potential to impact the outcomes. Remember, this is a two-way engagement where you have, for example, the trade union members or the trade representatives from the trade union and leadership. Each party must be able to put down their sort of positions from, their stance or positions, or what is it that they want. And it's from there a discussion ensues, obviously to attain a successful outcome and for the benefit of everyone. It needs to be free. The participation should be voluntary, including autonomy from state and corporate interests. So it needs to be, it's not a discussion where there's a power struggle and one body has power over the others. Not the case. Remember when we spoke to power earlier, that's what we are talking about. Reduced asymmetries. The more powerful parties, such as government, should work to reduce power asymmetries such that the views of either side can potentially prevail in a dispute. Now, with government, there obviously sits a lot of power, especially in different ministries and so forth. However, it needs to have reduced power asymmetries. So if it's a government representative talking with an organization, the power asymmetries should be on equal par in terms of engaging and ensuring a successful outcome. Communicating equally, an inclusive and participative forum of interaction should be created such that neither party is dependent solely on the benevolence of the other. Sincere. So honesty, sincerity, all of those things speak to being authentic. So be authentic when you are doing this. So sincerity also speaks to authenticity when you are genuinely sincere. It is a moral obligation to those in power to address the interests of their stakeholders and direct resources and activities to their benefit. Respectful. Respect, remember, is in so many aspects of our life and work. We see issues of where people are being disrespected. There's a lack of disrespect and so forth. So the parties should be able to put themselves in each other's position in terms of from an understanding, because respect is about understanding. Understanding the person sitting across from you, understanding their point of view, and being respectful. There's one thing that a lot of people fail to do is when someone is speaking, the other person fails to listen and vice versa. So if one person is speaking, the other is not listening, they are thinking of what they're going to say. And when this person stops speaking, the person across the table starts speaking. This person on the other side of the table is not listening. So you have people who are talking, but nobody's listening. Reasoned. In the debate, the argument should be framed in terms of why particular claims ought to be accepted. So keep the framework in terms of what are you looking to seek out of this engagement in terms of a successful resolution, right? And if it's a company who is partnered with a non-profit organization, the terms of reference in terms of how the non-profit organization is going to engage with the company and how the company is going to engage with the non-profit organization for a common goal towards the upliftment of people in a specific community. Reflexive. Now, it's a word that we've come across. I think it was in chapter 2. If you have forgotten, please go back and refresh your memory in terms of what the word means. All the parties must accept that they may need to change as a result of the engagement. As it's human nature not to want to take constructive criticism or want to change. But there are instances where a person or a group needs to change in terms of their thinking and their perception in order to move forward, because it is valid in that case, in the case where it is valid. It must be meaningful. The engagement needs to have a real impact on issues raised by those participating in the dialogue. The engagement needs to have real impact on issues raised by those participating in the dialogue. So what this means is that those individuals who are participating in the dialogue, right, they need to have a vested interest in terms of that particular discussion. It can't be someone who doesn't care about what is being discussed, or if there is a need for a certain outcome, they are not really invested in that. Okay. So those are the characteristics of stakeholder engagement. Keep in mind that that is the key things that you need to look at when doing stakeholder engagement to ensure that you're aligned and you're doing it properly. Then you have the 3 pillars of engagement. So on page 94, you will see there's a triangle, a diagram there. It's in the shape of a triangle, okay? The 3 pillars of stakeholder engagement, which is engagement spaces, dialogue, and transparency. All 3 frameworks or pillars tie into stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement is a multi-dimensional process that relies on those 3 key elements: dialogue, transparency, and an enabling physical and symbolic space where engagement can take place. So if you look at the elements, dialogue, what are we talking about there? We mean what is being actually discussed, and we're going to unpack that further down in the next page. So what I think I'm going to do there is I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop the recording. I'm going to also then get it uploaded so that you have an opportunity to listen to it. And then we're going to continue. This will probably be part B of week 5 recording session. And then part C and part D will follow through. Yeah. So I'm going to stop the recording and I will chat to you soon.